Okay, do you hear that thunder? Looks to me like I'm about to get rained on. If I'm going to get very, very wet, then by golly, I'm going to make a nice wet walk out of it. This little side street, I believe if you wander down it, it comes to a bunch of little like cafe and egg tart shops, as well as the former residence of one of Korea's former president's residence. This shop used to be a fully loaded, traditional, like fermented side dish shop. Here in Korea, those side dishes are called banchan. It looks like it might still be because it's still just as cluttered as it was like 15 years ago when I went in there. And the old lady told me her story. She had like one of those like resting mean faces, but she just talked to you and talked to you. She told you the whole story of how she got to that spot and started making banchan. And they were really good too, like the fermented stuff that she was making, like pickled this and that, and every single one of them had like a different flavor, from sweet to really, really sour, and different textures, from soft and almost gooey to like super deep crunchy. Artisan bakeries is kind of the image of gentrification in this neighborhood now. And I'm going to take a side street over here. This street, if you follow it straight, it leads to the one end of Insadong. Insadong is the most famous kind of traditional goods street that you can, the one that you'll find in like every single tour guide of Korea. In fact, I'm gonna walk a little ways down here because it is quite pretty after dark, and I am so rarely out after dark, and I'm expecting to get rained on anyway. Now down this little street, there is a restaurant. Do you know what tteokbokki is? Tteokbokki is those chewy rice cakes. Kind of, usually they're colored white. Usually they're served in spicy red sauce. And I'm not sure if it's still here, although I'd be surprised if it's gone. There was a tteokbokki restaurant here that was so famous, they would have a line out the door every single day, to the extent that the other shopkeepers in the street asked them, please put the entrance to your restaurant on the side of the building instead of the front, so that at least some of the line is hidden, so that the other shops in this street have a chance at attracting some customers. Because when people see a big line, they think, oh, whatever's in here must be so good, I'm going to join the line. That is what my friend Joe calls Velcro lines. People just line up because there's a line. Now, some people take that and use it to extrapolate entire cultural theories, but I don't think you can go quite that far. However, especially in a crowded city like Seoul, Koreans are willing to wait in line if they know something's good. Or sometimes if they know something, will photograph well for their Instagram. Now this little street here actually opens onto 2 schools. Which means the street is generally kept quiet, but because it's such a pretty street, and just look at this thing, quite often they film dramas and things here, especially at night. It's a very pretty place for a walk. And it's a place where I happily bring any of my friends who are visiting Korea. And if you like this walk, when you come to Korea, I will bring you here. Before dark or after dark, whichever you prefer. If you keep going straight, you come to Insadong, like I said, like where those tall buildings are. That's the end of Insadong, and that's kind of the tourist-oriented traditional goods market. So if you're a real ink brush painter, calligrapher, if you're a serious traditional clothing hanbok maker, Insadong is not where you're hanging out. You're probably selling your stuff to a shop in Insadong. But if you're a tourist and you want to get a wide variety of traditional goods in the space of a single shopping trip for all of your friends back home, Insadong is just the absolute perfect place. It is a great little street. There used to be more like tea rooms and things. Looks like a running club. The cicadas are still on their mission to propagate the species. Good for them. So if you go back the other direction, you get to Insadong. If you go this direction, you get to Samcheongdong, is kind of on the left side, and that's where the military hospital was that I pointed out, and the palace. And if you go to the right, you get to Bukcheondong, which is one of the few Hanok villages that is mostly preserved. But in the process of preserving them, they have refurbished them so that they all look the same. They haven't retained much of their individual character. The real different, unique, diverse Hanok neighborhoods are slowly disappearing these days. Now this little side street here, I'm going to take you down it, because this comes up to the other end. Oh, sorry. This is one of those cute little back streets. There are so many of them, and you never know which one of them is going to have that incredible sundubu jjigae, soft dumpling soup place, or the most amazing hand-poured coffee roaster, or some pâtissier who is trained at the Blue Gourmand in France and has brought their pastry skills to Seoul. So this is the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art again. We're approaching it now from the other side. Did you see that flash of lightning? Yeah, I'm getting wet. That's right. Again, here are some of the Hanok buildings. The beautiful Hanok buildings. It's sweaty, sticky, hot summer right now. And Hanok buildings are beautiful in front of a summer night sky. The other time they are most beautiful is under fresh snow. But you're just gonna have to, I don't know, sign up for my OnlyFans if you want to see my videos of the palaces under fresh snow. So again, there's kind of the backside of that nondescript government looking building. Here's the newer Museum of Modern Art part. This part mostly, I think, doesn't have displays. It mostly has like activity outreach kind of things and stuff like that. So if you're gonna like sign your kid up for a drawing class hosted by one of Korea's traditional painters or something like that, that's the kind of stuff they'll have in this building here. Or a tea tasting, or a, you know, teaching you how to do the Korean tea ceremony or something like that. Perhaps like makgeolli brewing. Makgeolli is a Korean, kind of a Korean brewed fermented rice beer. It's very nice. It's quite sweet, but it's very nice. And from here, the wall up ahead is once again the wall of Gyeongbok Palace. The palace I pointed out earlier when it was quite a bit lighter. Now it is dark. Hey, hey, hey. And here's that museum's courtyard. This is actually a really nice museum to go to, but since Corona, you usually have to sign up. You have to like register for a tour spot because they have to strictly manage the number of people going in at any time. And it is a popular enough site that it would overfill if they didn't make you register, which means you need to have the wherewithal to sign up a few days early if you actually want to make the tour. And this is the same little streety street we were walking down before, but now it's darker. That is a car. After my very first year in Korea, my uncle, I went back to Canada and I visited my extended family in Ontario. And my uncle asked me, how's the infrastructure there in Korea? Problem was I didn't know what that word meant at the time. So I made up some sort of a fudgy answer. But the fact is, Korea's infrastructure is amazing. You have a highly centralized government and a, how do I say this? Korea is used to a highly empowered kind of big government style, partly because of the period of the dictators. So, like, for Canadians and Americans, I think there's always a little bit of distrust in the government. There's always a little bit of, you know, well, what if there's corruption? Was it Ronald Reagan said the 7 dreaded words, I'm from the government and I'm here to help? Is that 7 or 8? Anyway, that cowboy frontiersman distrust of organized institutions is sewn deep into the North American ethos. But here in South Korea, there's a very different feeling because big government really was the thing that got Korea from one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere to one of the richest. That was mostly the doing, or, well, it's really hard to say it was mostly the doing of this and that. But let's just say at the end of World War II, the Philippines and South Korea were in very similar positions as far as what type of economies they had. You know, mostly agrarian, former colonies, huge populations, but thin on national resources or natural resources. And South Korea has lapped the field in terms of per capita GDP and stuff like that compared to most of the other post-war, post-colonies. A lot of that is because Park Chung-hee, Korea's president from 1960 to the early 60s to 1979, was very forethinking, really thinking forward as in terms of national infrastructure. Near the end of, well, at the end of World War II, sorry, not the end of World War II, at the end of the Vietnam War, every other country that was close friends, that was kind of under the United States' umbrella of democratic protection, got a scare because USA abandoned Vietnam. And Park Chung-hee was one of those, saying, wait a minute, if USA promised to help Vietnam become democratic and they just cut and run, what if they do the same thing to Korea? So he basically set out a goal to and invested like the nation's entire wealth in the industries that would create a country with its own functioning military. So that was industries like electronics, Samsung, vehicles, Hyundai, industrial machinery, heavy chemicals, oil refineries and things like that, SK. What else? And basically, well, that's right. Like steel, smelting and steel, all of the industries that you need to create your own war machine. And yes, shipbuilding was another one. Through that government-led investment, Korea really capitalized during the 1980s, during the economic boom times. Korea became one of the world's top shipbuilding countries. Korean cars made inroads, and now Hyundai is, a global car brand, as well as Kia. Electronics turned into, Samsung and LG electronics. So there was some forethought, there was some vision there. He also invested a lot of national wealth and energy into the national highway system and national infrastructure. And once again, back to my uncle, in order that trade from Seoul north of the river to south of the Han River could happen, and so that trade from Busan and the port cities of the south end of the peninsula could trade with the manufacturing happening in the Seoul area, where most of the people and the money were. So that is an important part of the story of Korea, but along with that, he was a dictator, and he suppressed unions and workers and solidarity movements again and again and again through means legal and illegal. He was followed by Chun Du-hwan during the 1980s, who was even more corrupt, even greedier, and basically a thug. And he's the one who people spit when they mention his name. That's a bit of the story of how Korea became the wealthy country it is now. And here is, if you see that row of houses along behind the close-up houses, kind of going up the hillside there, that's Bukcheon village. Bukcheon village is where, back before Korea became colonized and modernized, that's where the high-up mucky-muck nobles and things like that would live. And then we're about to cross in front of the blue house. After that, we're going to be in Socheon, is the name of the village, or the neighborhood. And Socheon is where like the archivists and the artisans and the scribes and things like that would live. So we're going from the side where the advisors and nobles lived to the side where, you know, the bean counters and record keepers live, as well as the area where like the poets lived. And this is also one of my favorite walks. I love this walk. The Blue House has just recently been abandoned by the new president. He's moved off to an area called Yongsan, which is closer to the Han River, quite a bit south of here, into some ugly, nondescript, modern-looking building instead of, you know, a fancy-looking presidential residence. So this very pretty street, which is gorgeous in the fall and also in the spring. There are cherry blossoms here in the spring and wonderful colors in the fall. Also in the spring, this little median here is filled up with flowers. But now that the president is no longer living here, and they no longer drive diplomats and foreign heads of state through this street to meet with the president, it might be that they're also going to cut the investment in making this street look so picturesque. So we'll see about that. For now, it is still a lovely place to walk. The thing that I always wonder about Yoon Suk-yeol moving the Blue House, well, here you can see some of the flowers on the median. The thing I always wonder about Yoon Suk-yeol moving the residence is that most of the ambassadors' residences and most of the embassies are around here too. The mountain behind the Blue House and the neighborhood behind that, and also the adjacent neighborhoods kind of to the east and to the west, are where most countries have their embassies. So now, by moving the presidential offices, he's also requiring every ambassador an extra 20 or 25 minutes of travel to see him if ever they want an audience with the president, or if they are summoned. The Blue House grounds are now open to tourists, and it is an absolute madhouse in there. Again, you have to sign up for a spot because it's just that crowded. And they're getting literally tens of thousands of visitors a day. We went in there one morning at like 10 o'clock in the morning. You know, they had just opened and already it was a zoo. And thoroughly unpleasant to visit, actually. So unless you have a friend who like knows a lot about the Blue House and the significance of this and that building and what the grounds are about and what, You know, well, this is the building where this deal happened, and this is the building where President so-and-so used to sleep every night, and this is the building when Barack Obama visited in 2006. If you don't know that stuff, then I would say it's not interesting to visit the Blue House right now. It's just all of the unpleasant things, crowds and waiting in line, drowning out the pleasant things, which is a very beautiful grounds with a lot of very pretty little corners and areas to sit or watch a waterfall or kind of wander on a meandering trail through some very pretty trees. None of that is fun when there's a person behind you pushing on your back in order to get their turn at the view. There's another of those medians with the flowers. Flowers are very nice. I like the flowers. The flowers are good. Swipe right on the flowers. It's been raining all day, so most people are hiding in their houses right now, which means that this walk I'm taking you on has about 5% of the normal number of people we would encounter on a walk like this. So tell me I'm awesome for giving you such a nice tour. Here is the Blue House. This is the view that you could always see. Now here's the back door to the Cheongbuk Palace. And if you've seen pictures of Seoul, you might have seen the gate, the Cheongbuk Palace gate, the front side of it. That building there with kind of the white, slightly curved line on the top, that is the Blue House. That is a very deep, rich blue roof, and a blue tiled roof was a sign of wealth back in the day. That little white tacky carnival tent is where people line up and show their ticket, and this shipping container painted peach is where they buy their ticket for entrance, or they show their online reservation and get their ticket. And then this little mini street area that's pretty during the day is now full of a line of people waiting in line. And it's not pretty anymore. It's just not pretty. Now, of the neighborhoods that have been spoiled or changed or damaged by the lack of foresight of a city or a country or planner or big decision-making mucky-muck, I don't know if I would put Blue House even on the top 5 list, but it is still sad. One of my favorite reasons to take a walk at night is the effect of street lights on trees, where you get those shadows and bright spots. You get those dark greens and the bright greens, and the leaves that are just, the edge of the reflection is shining so you can see it, but you can't see the full color of it. Everything that light and trees do together is good in my book. Swipe right on streetlights and trees at night. There's more thunder. I don't know, we've been getting a lot of thundery teases. It hasn't come yet. Touch wood. I'm sure I've just jinxed myself. Back in the 90s, when Les Miserables was really popular, suddenly everybody had the soundtrack and everybody was listening to it. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but it sure was popular in the circles I moved in. I remember my dad listened to the song On My Own. And in the song On My Own, there's the line, "In the rain, the pavement shines like silver." And my dad just got kind of caught totally off guard by the lyricism, by the beautiful imagery of that line in the middle of, I mean, I'm not sure what he was expecting listening to a musical soundtrack, but it was just, you know how like you listen to music and it's kind of just in the background, and then every once in a while, and some music is made to go in the background, but then every once in a while you get songs, you get a song or an artist who has something that goes in the background, but then every once in a while they just kind of startle you with just a minute of incredible musicality, some amazing solo in the middle of a otherwise nondescript pop song, or a lyric that is just fantastically beautiful or vivid, that sort of jumps out at you in the midst of what is otherwise just kind of a undifferentiated musical experience. And I mean, that effect is especially pronounced when you're driving. You know, like when you're some music is really good for driving because it's kind of undifferentiated. There isn't one part of the music that jumps out, and because of that, it's just good background as you drive. And maybe Dad was driving when it happened, but then he heard that line, "In the rain, the pavement shines like silver," and it broke through. I don't know, I'm not sure when the last time was that a song lyric or a melody broke through for me. It might have been listening to Lord's new album. Lord's newest album. I can't remember the name of it right now. Or I think 2021 album. There's a lot of vocal harmony on it. And at first, it was just kind of like, okay, here's some music. But the second or third or fourth time I listened to it, the harmonies, the vocal harmonies just kind of suddenly jumped out in relief and sort of asserted themselves. And like, you know, when you notice that your friend has bad breath, and once you notice that, you will never not notice it again. Well, once I noticed those melodies, it's impossible to not hear them when I listen to Lord now. So I guess they did their job. They had the intended effect. Something wonderful about music that grows on you like that. So this is the little four-way stop. There's the Cheongwadae Sarangche. Cheongwadae is the Korean name for the Blue House. Cheongwadae Sarangche, sarang means love, so Sarangche is like love house, I guess. And it's kind of a cultural space that people can visit. It's been closed for a very long time because of COVID. I'm not sure if it's open yet. This little side street here, that I'm pointing the camera down, when the North Korean commandos tried to attack the Blue House, they came about 200 yards up that street is where they failed that password test. And that's where the firefight started. So that's how close they got to the Blue House, which is kind of frightening. From there, there's a Korean movie called Shilmido about a group of South Korean commandos who were trained for a retaliatory attack on North Korea after that assassination attempt. And it shows the difficulties of these soldiers being trained. And then once they were brought up into like total peak fighting condition, the attack was called off because of politics, and they were kind of distraught. And there's a very melodramatic ending to it. This is the Mugunghwa-dongsan, the little flower park near the Blue House. This is a lovely place to come and take a walk. Down at that end, there are some exercise machines as per Korean park spaces. There are some free, quite clean public bathrooms right there. And a nice big open area here where tour groups often muster, gather and share instructions before heading towards the Blue House. I wonder if the Blue House tours are gonna, well, I just wonder what's gonna happen with them now that the Blue House is no longer the presidential residence. I guess we'll find out this year. I've noticed that there are a lot of tour buses lining the streets again. Here is yet another cute, quaint, cozy little narrow street to walk down. And from here, if you go left, there are 3 or 4 other little side streets you can wander down. But I am on my way home now, so we're not going that way. I've had all that Ghibli music in my head lately. My son asks for study music, and it's some of the best study music. Partly because he knows some of those movies. He hasn't watched all of them, but a lot of them. I read Howl's Moving Castle to him, and he loved that. I love that my son usually prefers the book to the movie. He often even loses interest in the movie, given the option. We usually we always read the book first, and that's kind of a rule that I've set. But once we've read the book, sometimes he's interested in seeing the movie and sometimes he's not. So straight ahead here, that big dark nothing that you can't see is Inwang Mountain. Inwang Mountain is another mountain that I climbed just recently with Matt. And it is an absolutely beautiful mountain. It has been the subject of numerous famous paintings. Like I said, the artisans and artists lived on this side of the Blue House, or of the palace, back when Gyeongbok Palace was the thing. And so as you wander through the side streets in this neighborhood, you will regularly come across little signs saying, the poet so-and-so used to live in this house, the painter so-and-so used to live in this house. Or a park bench with a recreation of a very, very famous painting saying, the painter who made that very, very famous painting used to sit right in this spot and, do whatever. It's neat being around areas like this. This is the Jahamun Road. It goes up to Jahamun Tunnel, but I am going to turn off my video now. If you've watched all this way, well, I appreciate your stamina. Nice work. But yeah, this is where I live. This is my area. This is where the president used to live. This is one of the coolest neighborhoods in Korea, if you ask me, and I love it. That is all for now. Bye.